When you look at the values or the student loan debt that people are carrying, we've also seen a huge increase in the cost for not only our educations, but our children's educations.
Welcome to the Next Level Income Show, where it's our goal to take your income, your investments, and your life to the next level. I'm your host, Chris Larsen. If you haven't yet, get a copy of our book for free at our website, nextlevelincome.com. That's www.nextlevelincome.com. Just click on the book link, and I'll even send you a copy if you put your address in. On today's podcast, I'm excited to welcome Suzanne Norman. She's the Director of External Relations and an Education Fellow for the Retirement Income Institute Alliance for Lifetime Income by LIMRA. She has spent over 3 decades in the investment industry serving large institutional clients as well as individual retail investors. Suzanne is a certified coach, a speaker, financial literacy educator, and the founder of the Wealthy Woman series. And she serves as a co-chair of CFA Society Boston's Financial Literacy Initiative and a strategic advisor to the Redwoods Initiative. And today, we're going to be talking about the forgotten generation, Gen X. But there are things in this episode that you can learn no matter what generation you're in as you move towards retirement. Suzanne, welcome to the show.
Hi, Chris. Great to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, it's great to have you here as well. And as we were chatting before the show, I love the topic because we're going to talk about some of the challenges that Gen X faces in terms of retirement. And I saw this topic come across, and I was like, this is pretty cool because we talk so much about the baby boomers, we talk a lot about the millennials, we talk about Gen Z. I'm Gen X, and it just seems like Gen X just kind of gets lost in the mix and we kind of go with the flow. But, this year I faced some challenges personally that our generation is starting to see. My stepfather has dementia and we moved him into assisted living. And, I've heard this term, the sandwich generation, and I realize now what it means because and it's not a nice sandwich. It's a squeeze sandwich where you're getting sandwiched in between the dual pressures of raising, my own family along with taking care of, who used to be, our parents. But before we dive in here, I'd love for you to share a little bit about your background and, how you got to be where you are today.
Thanks, Chris. And first, my deepest
Yeah.
sympathies. That is a almost daily topic, as you say,
Yeah.
particularly for Gen X. So
Yeah.
I'm sure we'll touch upon that at some point in our conversation.
Yeah.
So to introduce myself, I am a education fellow, the Retirement Income Institute, and I am proud to say that the Alliance for Lifetime Income, where that lives, is now within the LIMRA Foundation, our organization. So we're in great company, and it's been a joy to work with the Alliance for Lifetime Income for about 8 years. I've been an
Wow.
education fellow and a senior advisor. Yeah, long time. With them officially in that capacity since 2021. Prior to that, my firm, where I was a principal at Milliman, an actuarial consulting firm, we were a founding member of the Alliance for Lifetime Income. And I worked on a couple of
Yeah.
projects, so we got to know each other. So when I did what I call my rewirement, the Alliance for Lifetime Income reached out and said, like to me to continue my thought leadership, and my passion, as we talked about before, is helping women. So it's been
Yeah.
a wonderful organization to work with, and I'm so proud of the work that we have put together at the Institute. We probably have close to 140 papers right now, thought leadership within this protected retirement conversation. So it's been a wonderful journey.
Yeah, it's incredible. Like I was going through your website as we were talking about before. Yeah, and we have the link in the show notes. So if you're listening, I encourage you to check it out. I'm kind of I'm a financial nerd. I've got my MBAs in finance, and I love all the research. I almost got a PhD in finance. I love it all.
Mhm.
It gets a little deep for some people, so we're going to talk about how people can apply, some of the practical knowledge that you
Mhm.
guys are doing there. But if you don't mind, dive a little bit more into the Alliance for Lifetime Income and what the purpose is behind what you do.
Yeah, it's wonderful because it was really one of the first times that the industry came together. And when I say industry, it's the insurance companies as well
Mhm.
as the investment companies
Yeah.
that ultimately are serving solutions, as you say, being practical to
Yeah.
the consumer. And because of this retirement conversation and kind of conundrum, people
Yeah.
haven't necessarily saved enough. They don't necessarily know
Yeah.
what it's going to be like to spend the money that they've saved. Back in 2017, it really began to come together. And so in 2018, the Alliance for Lifetime Income, which is a 501(c)(6), was launched. And this is an education not-for-profit. So it was
Yeah.
really directed with the membership of these companies to help educate the consumer, as well as create this thought leadership from the Institute, as well as provide financial professionals like yourself with tools to have conversations with the consumers, but essentially, really at the core, educate people about what it takes to retire with confidence,
Yeah.
and protected income was really misunderstood, or continues to be pretty misunderstood, in the annuity space, particularly.
Yeah.
So this is why we formed this group. And again, thrilled that Limmer is continuing this great work that was started 8 years ago.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, as you know, one of the things that we've seen over the last century is a real transformation in, what retirement is. Social Security was founded in the early 19th century, or first half. Um, and at that time, people didn't live much longer than 65, and that was really a safety net, when it was first put into place. A lot of people used life insurance back then as their primary form of retirement. But it was very different back then. And then, as the mutual funds came into play, term insurance came into play, 401(k)s, Roth IRAs. It seems so much more complex now than it was 100 years ago, and people are living longer. The baby boomers have well, I think it's a $87 trillion at this point wealth transfer, coming
Yeah.
to their children, and it's probably a good thing, with some of the needs that seniors are facing in today's world. But what are some of the challenges that you are seeing out there, Suzanne, in terms of this kind of not only planning for retirement, but also really some of the ignorance that comes around what is needed for retirement out there?
Yeah. Oh boy. And you said we have 5 hours in this podcast.
We could do
I'm
a
kidding,
multi-part
but not
series. Yeah.
kidding. Right. It's
Yeah.
it's such a long conversation, but
Yeah.
I'll hit the highlights and certainly
Yeah.
connect to the research that we've done,
Yeah.
specifically in the GenX paper, but also, as you mentioned, at
Yeah.
protected.org, where we've got a lot
Yeah.
of research. So I think you hit upon one big thing, which
Yeah.
is longevity, right?
Yeah.
And also connected to the Social Security safety net, which again, it was only intended to replace about 40% of
Yeah.
that income when you stop working, meaning that savings were important, but you also had shorter lifespans. So what I see also contributing to this challenge is, of course, the defined benefit plan, which was again that safety net where, in exchange for all those great years that you spent at your company, Chris,
Yeah.
you got a check for life from a defined
Yeah.
benefit plan in theory.
Yeah. Like,
That's
and
changed.
most people would call that a pension, right?
Exactly.
For a
Thank
defined,
you.
yeah.
Yes, being a
Yeah.
little too jargony here with
Yeah.
defined benefit or technical. So yes, a pension. And in the paper, we reflect back on this, which many people know because they're living this. But when we looked at 1983, we saw that we had considerable defined benefit plans, right? And now flash forward, we've probably only got 4% of Gen Xers that are, or people, I'm sorry, in
Yeah.
general that are available to enroll in a defined benefit plan. They've been
Yeah.
replaced with the defined contribution plan, which, many times will look like a 401(k).
Yeah.
When we looked at Gen X, we see only 14% of Gen Xers actually have a defined benefit plan. So that part of
Yeah.
this three-legged stool that we talk about all the time is wobbly as well. And I know
Yeah.
we can have a very lengthy conversation about Social Security wobbliness, but
Sure.
the other thing I would probably add to this challenge, and we put this in the paper, is that Gen
Yeah.
X in particular has also had a lot of economic shocks. So if you and I reflect back, I'm
Hmm.
a Gen Xer,
Yep.
and we've seen 8 recessions out of
Have we really
the
eight?
stock.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And when we look at stock market corrections out of the most, the biggest 19, we're in four, or we've experienced four of the top 10. So
Wow.
we've had those
Yeah.
headwinds, and you already will talk, I think, more
Yeah.
about healthcare costs. But when I start thinking about
Yeah.
the sandwich generation, we also looked at the paper, and when you look at the values, or the student loan debt that people are carrying, we've also seen a huge increase in the cost for not only our educations, but our children's educations. So
Yes,
we
it's
have all these
incredible. Yeah.
economic headwinds that are really playing havoc with this wobbly stool, as we
Yeah.
call it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I saw that as well. I worked one of the first companies I worked for, Medtronic, which was a medical device
Mhm.
company. We had the option of a pension, but I opted out because I was like, I don't know if I'm going to be here long enough, and you know, I had a little bit of financial knowledge, so I said, oh, okay, I can probably direct these funds a little bit better. But yeah, talking to my peers, we just said, I don't even know if Social Security is going to be around,
Mhm.
much longer. The defined benefit plans were nice because people had almost another safety net that was there,
Mhm.
because I'm sure this is in your research as well. The average investor is only getting like a 3 or 4% return in the stock market. So even those that are
Mhm.
investing in their 401ks and saving for the future, they may not be seeing the types of returns that they expected, or they see a huge correction like we saw in 2008, 2009. I was like in some of my prime working years. It is just
Mhm.
like it's jaw dropping.
Mhm.
Now, if you can ride those out, it's fantastic if you're working with a financial professional
Mhm.
that can help you do that.
I,
But
I
yeah,
smiled. Oh, sorry. I didn't mean to
no,
talk
that's
over you. I
okay.
was
Please go ahead.
smiling
Yeah,
because what I didn't in my
yeah,
intro is my undergraduate degree is in psychology. And so being in this industry, the investment industry for over 3 decades, there were a lot of questions all the time saying, oh, psychology. But
yeah,
because we know so much of our success and failure as investors is going to be driven by us making optimal or suboptimal decisions. And
yeah,
one of the other aspects to continue the conversation with
yeah,
defined benefit, pension transitioning over to Chris is going to make his own investment decisions in his 401k
yeah,
is that we don't necessarily get the education on how to be good investors,
yeah,
even, personal finance decisions. So this
yeah,
is this is one of the key things that I think is a missing ingredient.
yeah,
And this is, I think, well known in the country that we
yeah.
only have about 30, I think it's the last survey, 35 states that require a semester of personal finance to graduate high school, meaning we are
Yeah.
sending people into this economic system without a baseline
Yeah.
knowledge. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons we started Next Level Income, is to help educate people
Mhm.
so they can take better control of their financial future. And I should have mentioned this at the top of the show, but the paper is called Gen X, the Forgotten Generation:
Mhm.
Retirement Challenges Facing Gen X in the Peak 65 Era.
Mhm.
And Gen X, our generation is going to start turning 65 in 2030. Is that right?
Mhm. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So what are some of the, we touched on some of the challenges that are in the paper here, Suzanne. Um, what are some that we haven't mentioned yet? And really, I want to get to what can readers take out of this, and what can investors and individuals take from this to
Mhm.
help better direct them and move
Yeah.
towards a more secure retirement?
Thanks, Chris. Yes, I guess the other thing that one thing that we talk about a lot in our research, we do a protected retirement income and planning study every year as well as the
Yeah.
papers that we're publishing. And we're very curious, and we're one of the few, I think, only survey that can, at the same time, surveys financial professionals like you and consumers and clients of financial professionals. So we really get a look at what's happening real time with those two populations. So the one other thing that I would talk about we drew from the paper is where are some of the gaps? And one of the
Yeah.
things that we really had concern about when we talk about the sandwich generation is that when advisors are asked how often they're having these conversations with their clients about
Yeah.
long-term care, about
Mm-hmm.
cognitive decline, we
Yeah.
see almost over a 50-point gap between advisors say, oh, yes, I'm having this conversation, and when the Gen X person or any consumer for that matter, client was asked, are you
Yeah.
having this conversation with your financial professional? It was much less.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
we're concerned back to
Yeah.
this conversation and language. Sometimes what you're saying, Chris,
Yeah.
people aren't hearing.
Yeah.
And, what can we do to bridge those gaps? So
Yeah.
that's critical. Now, one thing we also highlighted in the paper, which is very good for you as a caring financial professional that wants to educate is that when we look at confidence, by the way, back to the headline, people
Yeah.
are not feeling very confident about
Yeah.
retirement. So this
Yeah.
is, and when we look in general, Gen X, women especially.
Yeah.
However, when people are working with a financial professional, their confidence goes up to about 73%.
Oh,
So
wow. That's awesome. Yeah.
that's a big deal. So
Yeah.
having that sort of guide, that person that knows you, that hopefully is doing
Hmm.
planning with you, so that's an aspect that I wanted to draw out is that
Yeah.
relationship with the financial professional. I think the other thing that is important to know is that there are tools. So one of the things, or two of the things people will find on protectedincome.org are a generative AI tool that we used and built to answer general questions, specific
Yes.
questions, called
I love it.
Allie. And so it's if you
Oh,
haven't
yeah.
played with it yet, I encourage
Yeah.
you to do that.
Oh, I'm
And
going to
when I
check
say
that out.
play,
Yeah.
test it. And what I really enjoy about this
There
particular
she is.
generative
Yeah.
AI, yeah,
Or he.
um,
Yeah.
is that we drew from all of our research papers. And so the ability or inability, I should say, to or at least produce low hallucination is that
Yeah.
we are pulling from just our research. So
Yes.
it's
Yeah.
more likely to be accurate.
Yeah.
The other thing that I worked on at my last company is what we call the Retirement Income Security Evaluation Score.
Mm.
And you and I have already talked about the fact that some people, do a good job saving, but
Yeah.
then realize, wait, have I saved enough? Am I able to, make this live, my money live as long as I do? So
Yeah.
what is nice about this free tool is that you're able
Hmm.
to plug in about 10 inputs, everything you would have, you as an advisor, a consumer, to kind of get a test to see how you're doing. And
Yes.
we designed it to look like a credit score. So it's very
Oh, yeah.
intuitive when you look at it, and you can play with the inputs. So meaning if your
Yeah.
score is not as good as you would like it to be, you can, save more, maybe, modify what your spend looks like. And getting back to the financial professional community, it's not
Yeah.
intended to replace a formal plan, but it's intended to educate and raise awareness.
Yeah, what's great is you work with both the financial planners, the financial
Mhm.
professionals, as well as the investors.
Mhm.
So if you're listening today, you can take this tool
Yeah.
to your advisor that you work with and
Mhm.
say, "Hey, I'm going through this. Can we use this to supplement what we're doing?" And I know, like my stepfather has one of these on. He has his main investments with Fidelity, and it's got like a little. Uh, Thing in there. Now it doesn't cover everything he's got. It's not quite as sophisticated.
Mhm.
Um, but I love it. Yeah, I love Allie or Ollie. I had a friend in college named
Yeah,
Ollie,
we
so I
call
guess
her.
I
Yeah,
could call it hey,
we
Allie,
gender
Ollie.
her Allie.
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
But I like
So,
I
yeah.
like Allie. Yeah, and we actually just launched Chris Larsen AI. So you can do the same thing if you want to
I
ask your
love it.
real estate questions and go through
Mhm.
that. And it really is incredible. And one of the questions that you have on Allie is what is protected income? Because I know we
Mhm.
talked about a couple of the buckets, Social Security,
Mhm.
pensions. For us Gen Xers that maybe don't trust that Social Security is going to be there, maybe in its current form or in its current levels,
Mhm.
and don't have a pension. What are other forms of protected income that Gen X and investors can look to give them some more stability in retirement?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. And yes, the Alliance for Lifetime Income was built so that people would have that education, trusted education source
Yeah,
that was independent.
yeah,
The third thing to think about is within that third leg of the stool is our
yeah,
personal savings. And within our personal savings, we have the option to buy protected income, and that usually is going to look like an annuity. There are
yeah,
lots of different flavors, as you and I both know. So
hmm,
I won't necessarily
yeah,
go into all of them right now. But what I think is really interesting and our research bears out is that Gen X is actually really interested in annuities. Now,
hmm,
it doesn't surprise us, right?
yeah,
Because Gen X is probably, as we know, feeling very nervous about retirement.
yeah,
So having something that says you can convert what you saved into
hmm,
something that will last in theory, if you're buying a lifetime annuity,
yeah,
until you die. And
yeah,
there could even be something left over. It depends. So,
hmm,
financial professional is the one to ask, or you can
yeah,
talk to Allie, if you want.
yeah,
But that's really interesting research that we found. The other thing that I find fascinating, we put it in our paper, is that we also have another research project that we did where we asked a question of consumers and
Hmm.
said, what would you do if you inherited $100,000?
Hmm.
And what we got as an answer is that 69% of Gen Xers said they would buy an annuity. And I
Wow.
think this
That's
comes
interesting.
back,
Yeah.
yeah, and I should say versus putting it into the stock market. So
Yeah.
clearly, that one
Hmm.
feels risky, not to say you can't get
Yeah.
reward there.
Yeah.
But what I found so interesting in that is if we tie it back to the psychology.
Yeah.
And the fact that there is that certainty where
Yeah.
someone says, okay, I didn't
Hmm.
get lucky enough, and myself included, I never had
Yeah.
eligibility for pension.
Mm.
So in the case of the annuity, while it's not a pension, it will look and feel many times like that. So
Yes.
that's something, again, I
Yeah.
encourage people to educate themselves, explore that. But that is what most people have told us that they are looking for, is they want to feel safe. They want to
Yeah.
feel secure.
Yeah.
And this is one of those options that people have to fill in that hole.
Yeah, and it's great. I mean, again, as now a business owner, somebody that, basically has to construct my own retirement plan. One of the cornerstones and really the foundation of our financial pyramid is life insurance, which, life insurance can have a component that rotates into an annuity or looks like an annuity. My stepfather, we have a piece of his income coming from an annuity. And when you layer these things in, it can give you, like you said, a lot more security. Having gone through the downturns that Gen X has, it's nice to say, wait, even if the market turns down, I have, these other income buckets that I can rely on that are providing me with reliable income. And when the stock market's down, I might not have to sell during those bottoms. I can rotate in or out of the stock market in my portfolio, or have that as maybe some, like additional icing on the top,
Mhm.
when times are good. And yet that's really interesting that, nearly 70% of
Mhm.
Gen X responded that way. But as you mentioned, the psychology, that
Yeah.
makes good sense,
Yeah.
with
Well,
respect
and,
to
and
that.
something you said, Chris, I'll tie back to the financial professional, which we've written about, and we were discussing before the taping about Wade Pfau's work. One of the things
Yeah.
that is really critical for people to think about, and this could get a little bit more complicated. So, as
Yeah.
put it under the umbrella of portfolio construction, and
Yeah.
sometimes in financial planning, people talk about
Hmm.
buckets, meaning we've got
Yeah.
this near-term money, we've got medium, later, or risk profile. So,
Yeah.
meaning some of this money is intended like a classic portfolio allocation to be lower risk, right?
Yeah.
Some is a little bit more risk, maybe some high
Hmm.
risk. We've talked about, you've mentioned alternatives before.
Hmm.
The thing that's interesting about the annuity is that it allows for knowing that there's certainty of that income, which is clearly one of the main conversation points in retirement planning is, where's my income coming from?
Yeah.
When you have that kind of secure, you know that your needs are getting met.
Yeah.
Rest of the portfolio has the opportunity to have a slightly different risk profile. So
Yes.
maybe the objectives in the rest of the portfolio could be
Yeah.
more inflation protection, growth. Maybe
Yes.
there's a legacy component, I want to leave
Yeah.
something behind. So it really does give a little bit more control or
Yeah.
levers to a financial professional. And you and I both know,
Yeah.
insurance, whether it's life insurance, an annuity,
Yeah.
it's risk management at the
Yes.
core.
Yeah, absolutely. And, to that point, Suzanne, we talked earlier about, the conversations that, financial professionals say they're having, and the conversations that are landing. And one of the things being in sales that, I always used to remind myself of and also teach our sales team about was that the average person, or just people in general, and you can kind of give me your thoughts on this as a with your psychology background, but the average person needs to hear something 7 times before it
Mhm.
becomes, you common knowledge or knowledge. Excuse me. But, so, I just remember I'd be talking to surgeons about a clinical study and different things, and, and then the topic would come up, and I'm like, we had this conversation.
Mhm.
And, I see it with investors as well. You have a conversation, you address something, but it may not be relevant at
Mhm.
that time. And, speaking specifically about, retirement, long-term care, those planning needs that, maybe we know are out there, but just subconsciously, we really don't want to think about that.
Mhm.
We just had Thanksgiving here not too long ago. I know this show will be airing here a few weeks after Thanksgiving, but my wife and I talked to my in-laws about their plans for the future, having gone through what I just went through with my stepfather,
Mhm.
and they really didn't have this conversation.
Mhm.
They had thought about it. They have some long-term care, but none of us were on the same page when it came
Mhm.
to like, well, what are their wishes and how can we support those wishes? So what are you seeing in terms of your research about Gen X and their willingness to look at like you said cognitive decline, their
Mhm.
needs going into retirement,
Mhm.
the challenges that the country's facing in terms of caring for our seniors. I'm writing a book on senior housing right now, and we're
Mhm.
facing another crisis in terms of how are we going to care for our seniors and how are we going to
Mhm.
house them.
Mhm.
How is Gen X looking at that?
Well, I like to say that there's in our research a huge engagement, but I
Yeah.
don't know that that is necessarily the case, and some of that is going to hinge on
Mm.
another thing, which I'm sure supports what people have probably lived personally or read about, which is
Yeah.
only about 35% of people actually have a formal plan. And
Mm.
without doing a
Yeah.
formal plan, and when I say formal, that could be literally you did your own spreadsheet, but
Yeah.
having a where am I,
Yeah.
come to that, awareness,
Yeah.
because that's the only way you're going to know where you're going. And so
Yes.
some of this is that people aren't necessarily aware of the risk they have, and women in particular
Mm.
because of the
Yeah.
longevity, because of the increased risk of Alzheimer's. And
Mm.
so these are the conversations that we need to be having. But
Yeah.
unfortunately, our research doesn't show that it's 100% that people are
Yeah.
aware of that. But I think
Yeah.
that Gen X, absolutely, when you look at our paper and our research, wants to have more of those conversations than
Yeah.
the boomers. So that's maybe some good news,
Yeah.
but
That
I,
is.
I
Yeah.
personally would like to see more
Yeah.
interest, but I think
Yeah.
it becomes a little overwhelming.
Yes.
And as you say, having these conversations, there's, the famous family love letter that was created years and years
Mm.
ago, which gives people the opportunity to kind of, share their wishes and not just
Yes.
an inventory. And
Yeah.
so those are conversations that I think that can open up
Yeah.
as an advisor and just a concerned brother, a concerned sister, a
Yeah.
friend. Um, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, and that is one of the things when we worked with our family, our estate planning attorney about a decade ago. He had us go through a wonderful exercise, which was actually quite challenging, but it was what do you want to say to your children? What do you want your
Mhm.
family legacy to look like? And it was very enlightening, and he opened that door for my wife and I, one for us to first have those conversations between the two of us, and then share those wishes with our children. We did it in the form of a video, is how we did it.
Mhm. Thank
Um,
you. About to
yeah,
just say that everyone
yeah.
has their own recording device now.
Oh,
But yeah.
it's amazing.
Yeah.
You can open it up, and yeah, even 10 years ago we didn't have the same technology that we have now. So there's a lot of ways you can do it. If you need resources for estate planning, shoot us an email. You can send one to me, Chris at nextlevelincome.com, and we can help put you in touch with. We've got some great. We just had a couple people on the podcast actually. Andrew Howe, who's out in Utah, is a tremendous resource for people. But you also brought up another really good point, Suzanne. And I know one of your passions is working with women,
Mhm.
because some of these conversations, it's I've heard it's like, oh well, my husband handles that.
Mhm.
He handles those things, but women tend to outlive men.
Yes.
What are some of the specific challenges that you see with females when it
Mhm.
comes to these matters, and what resources do you all have to help them on their journey as well?
Yeah, thank you. It's a deep
Yeah,
passion of mine,
yeah,
empowering. Well, I shouldn't say empowering women because
yeah,
women are empowered. Just letting them know that being aware and having some
yeah,
maybe enhanced skills.
yeah.
So the things that play into this do tend to be in the older generations, maybe the silent
Mm,
generation, the boomers, is
Yeah.
that perhaps there was not a two-career household necessarily.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
sometimes because there might have been a little bit more from, and I'm being very general here, but there might have been a
Yeah.
little bit more familiarity with finances with the husband. And I'm
Yeah.
using a classic male-female marriage, but
Yeah.
what we've seen happen is that with that delegation becomes this lack of skill development. So
Yeah.
as you mentioned, so many women, and we see the numbers increasing, each year, the amount of women that are single
Yeah.
over age 65
Yeah.
keeps increasing, right? So
Yeah.
I think it's probably half at this point.
Wow.
When we say
Yeah.
that, it could be you're a widow, it could be never
Yeah.
married, it could be you're, unpartnered, but the point being that you are running your finances. And so
Yeah.
that delegation that may have happened maybe made sense because I do this, you do that.
Sure.
But my invitation for anybody is that this is not that complicated if you find that
Right.
trusted partner. Now, again,
Yeah.
you could decide to do it on your own. Of course,
Yeah.
there is that DIY mentality a lot of people have. Referencing back to the confidence, though, that we see in working with a financial professional, I
Yeah.
strongly encourage women to ask their friends because we're great at referring.
Yeah.
So the thing that I often say is that it's not optional, right? It's
Yeah.
required. And you
Yeah.
look at the money that will be transferred down.
Yeah.
The other challenge that we have seen, and this is tends to be anecdotal, it's been reported in a number of big studies, but when the husband dies, as traditional
Mm.
marriage we're describing,
Yeah.
oftentimes the wife will leave that advisor. And so this is a
Mm.
call out to
Interesting.
financial professionals. Yep.
Yeah.
And this is a call out because as a woman, I can reference this as well.
Yeah.
We're not always seen and we're not always heard.
Mm. Yeah.
So what I have written about, and these are, on protectedincome.org, is a
Yeah.
lot of, as we call it, pracademic solutions. So we want to kind of ground
Yeah.
everything in research, but we also want to give people tips on what to do. So
Right.
there are a lot of checklists that I put in my papers about
Yeah.
questions that you can ask. We also have a great how to interview a financial advisor.
Yeah.
Hopefully you're getting referred to somebody that, you trust.
Yeah.
But getting educated into, how that advisor is paid.
Mm.
I'm
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of planning, so making sure that somebody has that conversation with you about planning. So the invitation is there that please get educated. At
Yes.
least know how to have these conversations.
Yeah.
And if you are in a marriage currently, and you have delegated, make sure that in those meetings that you're having, that you're part of that conversation, that people
Absolutely.
are asking you open-ended questions, right?
Yeah.
Because this is where we can discover in ourselves where we might have some gaps.
Yeah, that's great. And I love what you said. Yeah, it's you can be empowered, but you could be ignorant of some of
Mhm.
the
Mhm.
knowledge that's out there. And one of the things that we do with our investors is we teach them what questions to ask when they're going
Mhm.
into an investment. Because if you don't know the language, you really can't have the conversation. So yeah, getting educated, whether you're male, whether you're female,
Mhm.
and being more educated as you go into those conversations to know what questions to ask can help increase the trust you have with those
Mhm.
people that you're working with and doing that. And there's so many resources now, and there's male and female financial
Mhm.
advisors. So if you prefer, like a doctor, to go to work with
Mhm.
somebody of your own gender, you can do that
Yeah,
today a
and
lot
and that
easier
is
than the past.
absolutely not to say males cannot be
Yeah.
great advisors to women. Absolutely
Yeah.
not. I'm meaning,
Yeah.
yes, they can.
Sure.
One other,
Yeah.
I guess, just important point to make, because you asked this earlier,
Yeah.
Chris, which is, this risk that women have with longevity and
Yeah.
certainly cognitive decline and everything
Yeah.
is, it may not be right for you, but I am a
Yeah.
huge proponent in making sure you understand, is long-term care insurance something that is still available to you? We
Yeah.
can absolutely in the insurance industry age out
Hmm.
of certain
Yeah.
investments or products, but
Yeah.
that's something that gives people, again, peace of mind that you have the ability to tap into a resource if those costs increase.
Yeah.
And one thing we put in our paper, which I've written about before, research from Milliman, is what healthcare costs will cost women out of pocket. So this is not care. This is you writing a check, so to speak.
Yeah.
$320,000 is what's
Wow.
expected
Yeah.
for women in there, as they move through retirement. And
Yeah.
so that's really something to be thinking about.
Yeah, and that's one, as we move and I remember when I was approaching 40, I was like, I need to start taking some additional steps, with my
Mhm,
health. And it only increases as we get
mhm,
older, through our 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. That cost of care increases. And, if the cognitive decline is a piece of it that I've,
mhm,
seen personally in our family,
mhm.
then it's even that much more important to have that plan in place,
Yeah.
not only from what your wishes are, but also the financial piece.
Mhm,
And yeah, long-term care, we just did a module on this for our coaching clients. It doesn't always make sense depending on your age, but one of the things that we've done in our family is we have long-term care riders on our life insurance. So it
mhm,
makes it a lot more affordable. It makes a lot more financial sense, but we don't have to give up that option for ourselves or for our loved ones or for our families. And a lot of people just say, "Oh, I'm not going to do long-term care," but it's not always an either or. It can be blended in with some of the other
mhm,
strategies that are
mhm.
out there and give some more of that protected income as you mentioned as people go through that.
I personally have one of those.
I love it. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
a great option.
yeah.
My grandparents had long-term care. My in-laws have it, as I said. But again, it's gotten very expensive
Mhm,
in terms of the payoff. I know some financial advisors say, "Oh, it's not worth getting long-term care,"
mhm,
but then, well, what is your plan? So that's
mhm. Yeah.
you still should have a plan, even if you don't have it. Suzanne, again, I love the website. I love all the information. Again, I'm kind of a nerd when it comes to this sort of thing, but I highly encourage you if you're listening to check it out. If you're Gen X, you got to read the paper, The Forgotten Generation. It'll resonate certainly. Ally is an awesome tool. I
Mhm,
was I was playing with it a little bit here, and I love how it's very actionable.
mhm,
It's very concise, and then it also gives resources. So it'll direct you towards specific documents. So if you're a little overwhelmed going to the website, you can go straight to Allie in the upper right hand
mhm.
corner and pull through that. Anything you'd like to add before we wrap up here, Suzanne, about how people that are listening can utilize the website and what you all do to help them towards their financial independence or more financial security as they move towards retirement?
Sure. I have in a lot of my presentations I pull in quotes. And so this is one of the quotes from Eleanor Roosevelt, which is it
Mm.
takes as much energy to wish as it does to plan.
Oh,
And one of the first steps we can take as empowered individuals
yeah,
is really taking a good look at where we are. And a lot of that is making sure that you have put things in place and you're sometimes, I know, paralyzed because there's so much to do, but
yeah,
inch by inch, right? The journey of a
yeah,
thousand miles starts with a first step. So I just really encourage people, and I am a coach, so I do talk about how to get into action a lot.
yeah,
And I think the very first step is maybe get your rise score and see where you are and see
yeah.
what gaps might exist for your protected income.
I love that. Thank you for that. Great quote. And then, Suzanne, what's the best way? We've shared the website here,
Mhm.
but what's the best way for listeners to reach out if they want to talk to you, if they want to look at how to potentially work with you as well?
Yeah, thanks for asking. So, as an education fellow, a number of us work with clients for lifetime income, but we also,
Okay.
of course, are independent. I
Yeah,
do coaching and consulting. And so, if people are interested in reaching me directly, they can reach out to SuzanneNorman.com. And I encourage you to get to me that way, or you are welcome to get any information from the Alliance for Lifetime Income .org and by LIMRA, of course.
perfect. And we'll make sure we have all that in the show notes. Suzanne, thank you so much for your time. I hope you and your family have a wonderful holiday season.
Thank you, Chris. You too.
Hey, Chris here again. I hope you found this episode valuable. Now, I have one more thing to gift you. We have a page for my coaching clients where you can get a free copy of my book, as well as much more from previous guests on the show. Just check out nextlevelincome.com/coaching to get a free copy of my book, audiobook, and much more. I'll send you a copy of my book and cover all the shipping costs as a thank you for listening to the podcast. Also, please like, share, and take just 90 seconds to give us a rating on Apple Podcasts.